would want us to switch gears from politics and talk about something that I think a lot of these politicians should have included in their manifestos. Okay, so Scotland is in the lead. They've become the first country in the world, which shouldn't have happened because women have been there from the beginning of time, but it's okay. So they are the first country in the world to make period products free for all, and there is now a legal duty on local authorities to provide free items such as tampons and sanitary pads to anyone who needs them. I like that they said anyone who needs them, but yes, products will be distributed through councils and education providers as the Period Products Act comes into force. When will this happen for us? When will the leaders, our political leaders, see that we cannot help what happens every single month, which sounds like a taboo if we speak about it in public? We see free condoms being distributed, and yet we have to pay for sanitary pads, and they are expensive. It is ridiculous to think about the impact it has on education, because so many girls miss school. So many girls are forced into marriage because now they're ready, to become a woman, and they're told that it's going to be easier for you to get pregnant than it is for you to go through your period. So I'm going to start with Mariam of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, as the only other menstruator on this panel, I have a few thoughts. It's not taboo, honestly. See, this is the thing. What have I said there that warrants this reaction? Except facts. But yeah, so happy for the Scottish people. It's so odd that probably a country that is not as badly off as the rest of us is the one to implement free period products for all, and that's a wonderful thing. I'll go back a little bit on what Kwach had said earlier about not being a fan of affirmative action, and I'll just tie it in with what's going on here. So when you say Nakuru is all female government, a female senator, female this, there's been a lot of transitions of women from women rep to other elective positions. So it might not have made sense as a position, but even me as someone who has questioned it time and time again, I see how it builds women to be more ready for competitive politics in other fields, not just as women reps. So, and representation matters. It's a matter of political goodwill. When Amina, you say we have condoms in dispensers, like in public bathrooms at universities, at government offices and everything, that was goodwill because of the AIDS pandemic. And everyone was just solely trying to make sure that our infection rates go down. So what we need is people to give goodwill as well in parliament now, and that's a good thing because we have more elected leaders now than ever that are female, and hopefully they will be the ones championing for the cause, because like you said, there's so many girls missing school. It's an issue of health, dignity, education, everything. So hopefully the women that have gotten to parliament, that's on your agenda, please.
Okay.
We need period products for free.
Yes. Thank you so much, Madam.
I was ready.
All right. I know you were ready. I could see that. So, Kwach and Macho, no need to mansplain. Can we take a break? Let's take a break. We're going to be back. You're watching TT. Thank you, Maria. Well said.
And that's on period.
And that's on period.
All over the world, girls and women have trouble accessing their necessary menstrual hygiene products, and girls and women miss days of school and work every month. In the US, the problem is severely under-researched, but still widespread, with low-income women using dirty and dangerous products because they can't afford the steep price. The current status of women and menstrual hygiene is back in the old age, where menstrual taboos that have been institutionalized by the passage of time and reinforced by the lack of women in positions of power. In New York, I have introduced legislation that calls for access to menstrual hygiene products in public schools and shelters statewide. No girl should miss even one day of school because she can't afford a sanitary napkin. Similarly, women and families in shelters should not have to dig deep into their already empty pockets to access products that will allow them to get to work, attend school, and go on job interviews. The international movement to free the tampons aims to thrust the issue of menstrual health into the mainstream of public dialogue. Honestly, I didn't know I was going to become a periods rights activist. When I was working on my bill to repeal the tampon tax 2 years ago, I hadn't even heard the term menstrual equity. I introduced the bill before it hit the national stage. My staff and I were discussing gender bias in the law and in society. We talked about the pink tax, the reality that women pay more for the same products than men do. We then discussed the reality that the vast majority of pronouns in the law are male, and how that affects women in the marketplace and in society. And then someone brought up tampons, and I wondered aloud if they were taxed. When we learned that fruit roll-ups were worthy of tax-free status, yet essential menstrual hygiene products were not, my female staffers and I stood in furious disbelief. This told us that if women's health took a backseat to general health, then menstrual health wasn't even in the car. A lot of this is because state legislators around the country are predominantly.
When feminists tell women that they fought for women's equality, especially working in leadership, they almost never talk about men's contribution to proper menstrual sanitation, something that occurs approximately 450 times throughout a woman's life, and the availability of the pill that have been instrumental for the modern working woman. In a different video on this channel, link above and in the description, we talked about men's contribution to proper menstrual sanitation through the years, especially the relationship between the First World War and sanitary pads, developing pills to solve menstrual disorders, and the Indian man who invented the simple machine that makes cost-friendly sanitary towels. This man didn't have to be a woman to understand the importance of accessible sanitary towels and do something about it, but he did it anyway, even though his wife ironically refused to support him and even threatened divorce. You can watch the episode on TED. So we innocently start with proper sanitation for women, to patriarchy, to more women in positions of power, to equal pay, just bundle everything together. For the record, we believe that any programs or campaigns that increase access to female sanitary products are genuine causes, because a lot of women throughout the world have difficulties accessing them, and the outcomes of that are quite catastrophic to say the least. So if the last statement confuses you on the purpose of this video, just hang in there for a minute. You've heard the constant mention of the patriarchy and how taxing period products is because there aren't enough women in power. This in line with feminists comfortably taking all the credit for the modern working woman and highlighting the importance of proper menstrual sanitation, while in the same breath, blaming the patriarchy for any of the related issues. We know the patriarchy and what it means to feminism, that is, men have always worked towards oppressing women throughout human history, and women have always relied on strong, powerful, independent women to champion their empowerment causes. So, giving men credit for women empowerment would defeat the whole purpose of feminism, or at least the man-hating movement it has become. The solution: try as much as possible to blur out men's contributions towards women's empowerment. While the genesis of women empowerment made perfect sense, what it has become today is just something else. Does every female issue have to be tied back to men, especially the so-called patriarchy? Why does everything have to always go back to money and power? Which is turning out to be the purpose of modern-day feminism. Specifically, why does empowering women have to go hand in hand with hating on men, or even worse, bringing men down? This question specifically stems from the argument that men get condoms for free while women have to pay for period products, which is so common yet so misguided.
No hands and no darling, I don't dance, and I'm with Roscoe, I'm with Rocker, I think I deserve it.
Democrats.
situation are different. Can you believe the guy who lives in the house where it was being raided took out his camera and went on to...
And I can't stress this enough. Count your fucking days, bitch, because I am ultimately tired.
If 2 + 2 is 4, right? And 5 + 5 is 10. Okay. What the fuck is this? I didn't.
What do the two have to do in the same sentence? It is small things like these that constitutes adding fuel to the gender wars and raising the tension as well as hostility among the sexes. After all is said and done, they, after starting the fire, completely oblivious of their actions, start asking why everything always culminates into a gender war. The irony that men should only say what they are told to say and be silent when they are required to is just something else. You know, no uterus no voice, while in the same breath men, who have no uteruses, are supposed to be allies and champion for women's rights and address women's issues. Anyway, the fact that women empowerment has to go hand in hand with the war on men and the expectation of men standing up for women is quite something. Back to the purpose of the video. It is possible for women to champion free menstrual products, if that is all they are interested in, without necessarily going after condoms. Women's hygiene should not be bundled together with other social issues, like equal pay, because the moment these social issues start being debated on and addressed, then women's period hygiene is brought into it, which is unfair. That teenage girl on her period just wants proper hygiene to move on with her everyday life. Conflating that with things like equal pay just trivializes it instead of addressing the actual issue at hand. Throwback to a time when a Kenyan female leader, who has been elected as a women representative to the National Assembly, gave out free sanitary pads and slapped her face on them. These are also women in power, and women's issues take a backseat when competing with personal interests. Bringing condoms into the whole argument seems to try to shed light on what they call a patriarchal society that favors men at the expense of women. Another common condom period product argument that has been repeatedly highlighted so far goes along the lines of women cannot avoid the use of period products every month because periods are natural, while men can avoid the use of condoms because they can abstain. Again, just playing into the whole patriarchy narrative that I doubt will die anytime soon, and trying to argue that free condoms should be substituted with free period products. 3 things. 1. What are men supposed to do with free condoms? Newsflash: men do not use condoms when they are enjoying alone time because they trust themselves that much. Neither do men use the free condoms as water storage containers in their homes. The point being, men use condoms in their physical interactions with mostly women. Mostly in this case referring to same-sex relationships. So condoms do not exclusively favor men at the expense of women because they are used with women, and as such, women both directly and indirectly benefit from the availability of free condoms. On to the second thing: periods are as natural and biological to women as mating is to both men and women. Feminists and like-minded people often argue that societies need free menstruation products more than they need free male condoms, since women cannot do much about their periods as men can with their sex drive. Again, why we can't have free condoms and free menstrual products is something they will have to explain if it goes anything beyond their misandry. Arguing that men can do without sex while women cannot do without periods is just misguided. First, current female reproductive technology has allowed women to artificially avoid or postpone periods for things such as vacations or major events like a loved one's graduation or wedding. But, let's not pick that route, but instead, the argument of men staying without sex as a strategy towards eliminating free condoms and ushering in free period products. According to this graph by the Institute for Family Studies, both married and unmarried women have way more sex than married and unmarried men. The greatest gender differences in sexual activity are recorded among unmarried people, with unmarried women having way more sex than unmarried men. In a 2002 study published by the CDC, among adults 25 to 44 years of age, 97% of men and 98% of women have had vaginal intercourse, 90% of men and 88% of women have had oral sex with an opposite sex partner, and 40% of men and 35% of women have had anal sex with an opposite sex partner. About 6.5% of men 25 to 44 years of age have had oral or anal sex with another man. Based on a differently worded question, 11% of women 25 to 44 years of age reported having had a sexual experience with another woman. In another study published by the CDC in 2011, among adults aged 25 to 44, about 98% of women and 97% of men ever had vaginal intercourse, 89% of women and 90% of men ever had oral sex with an opposite sex partner, and 36% of women and 44% of men ever had anal sex with an opposite sex partner. Twice as many women aged 25 to 44, 12%, reported any same-sex contact in their lifetimes compared to men, 5.8%. Among teenagers aged 15 to 19, 7% of females and 9% of males have had oral sex with an opposite sex partner, but no vaginal intercourse. Women between 14 and 24 years engage in more casual sex compared to men of the same age, as reported by 36% of females and 10% of males. Women declared more same-sex partners at 13% compared to men at 2%. Females report lower rates of condom use in their first sexual encounter at 50% compared to men at 65%. 47% of women and 64% of men report regularly using condoms. Approximately 17% of men aged 40 to 50 have never been married and 24% are childless. Among women aged 40 to 50, 14.1% have never married and 15.9% are childless. These numbers are fairly consistent with 20 to 25% of highly educated adult European men remaining childless in Austria, Germany, the Netherlands, UK, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. 34.4% of older men and 23.6% of older women are childless. Interestingly, childless women have higher median personal net worth, $173,800, than childless men, $132,500. Childless women are also more likely to consider themselves in good health, 77%, compared to 72% of childless men. Story for another day. The point being, women are as sexually active if not more than men, without matching levels of testosterone. Thus, engaging in sexual activity is natural and biological for both men and women. But, require men to stay without sexual activity without requiring the same of women, and any efforts to do so is labeled misogynistic, as it involves telling women what to do with their bodies by suppressing female sexuality.
All right, lower down the volume. Can men spread BV or can they get it? All right, first, if you didn't know, BV is bacterial vaginosis. It is a vaginal inflammation caused by overgrowth, bacteria naturally found in the vagina. So it is something that men cannot get because they do not have a vagina, but they can spread it. Now, let's say if a man is having unprotected sex and it's more than multiple women's, so he is most likely to carry the bacteria that is associated with BV and then spreading it on to the next person. And then that bacteria will get on his penis. He might not even know that he has it unless he gets some symptoms such as discharge from his penis, an odor in his penis, itchiness, also in the urethra. He can even have pain when he's peeing or blood in his semen or urine.
The third thing has to do with the primary reason why condoms are free. Having had 10 or more lifetime sexual partners is associated with higher odds of reporting a cancer diagnosis than having had 0 to 1 sexual partners in men and women. Women who have 10 or more lifetime sexual partners also have higher odds of reporting a limiting long-standing illness. Particularly, women with 5 to 9 lifetime sexual partners have a 64% increased likelihood of reporting a limiting long-standing illness. Women with 10 or more lifetime sexual partners are 91% more likely to report a cancer diagnosis compared to those with 0 to 1 lifetime partners. The odds of reporting cancer are 69% for men with more than 10 lifetime sexual partners compared to those with 0 to 1. Previous research has shown that specific STIs may lead to several cancers. It is interesting the risk is higher in women when compared to men because the link between certain STIs and cancer is stronger in women. Rates of human papillomavirus, HPV, infection in sexually active young females have been consistently reported to range from 19% to 46%. Nearly all cases of cervical cancer can be attributable to HPV infection. Moreover, HPV has been found to be associated with cancers of the mouth, penis and anus, cancers that are most common in older adults. Other STIs, such as gonorrhea infection, have been shown to increase the risk of prostate cancer in black men. This table presents the trends in the number of lifetime sexual partners for women. In the 70s, 43% of adult women had one partner and 2% had more than 10. In the 2010s, 22% had one partner, while 18% had more than 10. It is evident that the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s following the availability of oral contraception and the legalization of abortion came with a dramatic change in sexual permissiveness, especially among women. A lot of countries rolled out free state-provided condoms in the wake of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and when you come across the spots where the condoms are placed, that's the message: get a free condom and manage the spread of HIV/AIDS. According to the American CDC, in 2018, men accounted for 30,691, 81%, of the 37,968 new HIV diagnoses in the United States and dependent areas. Most, 86%, new diagnoses among men were attributed to gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. According to UNAIDS, 48% of all global infections are among women, while 52% are among men. The annual number of new infections have dropped 27% among girls and women since 2010 compared to 18% among boys and men. More recently and remarkably, the primary face of AIDS is a woman from the Global South, a face deserving both sympathy and support, if not rescue. Meanwhile, men who have sex with women remain a forgotten group in the epidemic, almost entirely unaddressed in HIV prevention programs. Upwards of 70% of transmissions worldwide are now between a man and a woman, but programs and policies largely fail to include the prevention needs of men who have sex with women. It is clear that the only thing going for men in the global fight against HIV/AIDS is the availability of free condoms, and that, apparently, is a problem for some people. In Ethiopia, HIV is 1.62 times more prevalent among adult women than men, while 61% of deaths occur among adult women and the death rate is similar among adolescent women and men. Worth pointing out is the fact that women are socially and biologically vulnerable to the spread of HIV/AIDS. The social presentation of women's increased vulnerability to HIV/AIDS is largely feminist, arguing that women are more vulnerable because of societal inequalities, which is similar to the arguments presented by the women sampled in this video. The epidemiological profile of Black and Latina women living in the poorest cities being most likely to contract HIV resonates strongly with the vulnerability paradigm. A socially disadvantaged, monogamous, and unsuspecting woman is infected not through her own behaviors but as a consequence of her partner's wrongdoing. The social and epidemiological profile of female vulnerability in the context of HIV is further supported by studies suggesting that a woman's greatest risk of HIV exposure is her marriage, followed by other targeted groups such as commercial sex workers, pregnant women, and migrant women. Feminists suggest that power differences between men and women increased women's susceptibility to gender-based violence and non-volitional sex where they cannot negotiate for the use of a condom, the same ones they are constantly questioning why they are being provided for free. Feminists also argue that the gendered socialization of women places more premium on love and romantic relationships increase their susceptibility to be infected, of course based on the actions of their partners and not on their own. Even if they possess the agency to do so, women may not want to negotiate for condom use because condoms seem antithetical to trust, love, closeness, and fidelity. Again, the same condoms that they have a problem with being provided for free. Policymakers increasingly demonstrate their ability to be gender savvy, including widespread recognition of married women's elevated risk for HIV in many parts of the world. Before we go to women's biological vulnerability to HIV infection, a couple of things to clarify. Compared to those who were married, the risk of HIV infection is approximately 2 times in those who were never married, while those who were widowed presented as much as twice the risk of HIV infection. In South Africa, after controlling for age, race, having multiple sexual partners, condom use at last sex, urban/rural dwelling and level of household income, those who were married living with their spouse had significantly reduced odds of being HIV positive compared to all other marital status groups. In the U.S., divorced and separated individuals are 4.3 times more likely to die of HIV/AIDS than married individuals. Single/never married persons are 13 times as likely to die of HIV/AIDS as their married counterparts. While marital status is associated with HIV/AIDS mortality among men, it had no significant association with death in women, which is still not enough to allocate more HIV-related resources for men. African American and Hispanic women have a significantly higher risk of death than their non-Hispanic white female counterparts. In Nigeria, HIV prevalence among currently married and never married women was 3.4%, but was 5.9% among formerly married women. The odds of HIV infection were found to be 1.8 times higher among formerly married women compared with currently married women and never married women. The odds of HIV infection were 1.5 times higher among women who had made their sexual debut before the age of 15 years compared to those who delayed it. The odds of HIV infection are 1.4 times higher among women who had recently had transactional sex, that is, sex workers and anything related. So, contrary to popular feminist claims, women in relationships are actually safest in terms of the risk of HIV exposure compared to those who are not. But the obsession of feminism with the destruction of family structures, with the basis being that they are an example of a patriarchy, has led to doing everything possible to keep women out of unions. This phenomenon could easily be tied back to the sexual revolution that followed the invention of the pill in the 60s and legalization of abortion in the 70s, both events being responsible for women's sexual freedom. This freedom has come with a number of unintended outcomes, obviously disease being top of the chats, but you know the relationship between feminism, women, and accountability, well, there isn't any. Gender differences in the self reveal that from a young age, women value relationships, not necessarily romantic ones. Independence and autonomy are essential in human development. The relevance of autonomy is different in boys and girls. Women place importance in interpersonal relationships compared to independence. Women are also more likely to explain their ideal self in terms of interpersonal relationships. Somehow, the female self that is interpersonally oriented and the consequences associated with that, which is the pursuit of relationships, are blamed on men. Just blame men for everything. The female biological susceptibility of HIV infection is founded on surveillance statistics showing that heterosexual HIV transmission accounts for more infections among women than men, suggesting that women might be at greater risk of infection if exposed through heterosexual intercourse. The plausibility of female biology and HIV exposure is supported by studies suggesting that sexually transmitted diseases, including chlamydia and gonorrhea, move more from men to women as opposed to the other way around. Studies involving serodiscordant couples and men's contact with sexual workers revealed that women are more than twice as likely as men to be infected as they are exposed to the virus. There are 14 HIV-positive women for every 10 infected men. While the numbers do not exactly bring up a gender difference in the prevalence of HIV, the funding and support for patients are more inclined in favor of women compared to men, which explains why new infections have declined more in women than in men. But they will tell you it is a man's world. World leaders, organizations, and social rights activists have bought into the female vulnerability paradigm in advocating for more female support in the HIV pandemic, while completely neglecting men. Internal concern for female vulnerability has given rise to more attention and funding for women. Programmers and interventionists have also responded to the international attention to women's vulnerability, encouraging women to reduce their HIV risk by learning how to suggest condom use and how to use condoms with their male partners, rather than deferring condom decisions to men. Again, the same condoms they have a problem with being free while period products have to be paid for. If one sex wins, all sexes lose. No matter how much the interventions focus on women, ignoring men in the HIV pandemic is detrimental to both sexes. Yeah, both. Majority of women interact physically with men, at least primarily. So if HIV prevention programs do not include men as it is today, women still remain vulnerable to exposure and infection. They will complain about condoms being free while also complaining about teenage pregnancies forcing young girls to discontinue their education. If only they knew what they wanted, societies would be so far ahead. A more plausible argument based on female susceptibility to new infections would be advocating for free female condoms so that women do not have to negotiate with anyone over condom use and they are able to express their sexuality without all the risks that come with it. Before ending the video, providing free period products for women also requires goodwill from them. If a woman genuinely knows she can afford period product, then she shouldn't stock free ones because what that does is it limits access for those women who actually need the products and cannot afford them.